All right, so today we're tackling a topic that most people probably try not to think about too much.
Yeah.
Eviction notices.
Yeah, nobody wants to think about getting one.
Right. I mean, it's that phrase that kind of sends a shiver down your spine.
Oh, for sure.
Especially if you're renting, in a tough market like California.
Absolutely.
But hey, knowledge is power, right?
So we're doing a deep dive into the world of evictions today in California.
It's amazing, how many misconceptions there are out there about this.
Really?
Oh, yeah. People just hear eviction notice and they assume that's it.
Game over.
You got to be out like tomorrow.
Right. Like you got to pack your bags.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works.
No, not at all. It's actually just the beginning of a whole process.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And there are a lot of things you need to know as a tenant.
Okay. Well, that's why we're here.
Exactly.
We're going to break it all down.
All right.
We've got legal guides, FAQs, even a script for like an informational video for tenants.
All about evictions, specifically in California.
And the thing is, there's so many different types of notices.
Oh, wow.
Different rules, different timelines.
So it gets complicated.
Yeah, it can be.
Okay, well, let's start with the basics then.
Okay.
What is an eviction notice? Like, what is it really?
Legally speaking, an eviction notice is a formal written notice that comes from the landlord to the tenant. And it basically states their intent to evict from that property.
Got it.
It's a legal document that lays out the reason why they want to evict you.
Okay.
And it'll tell you how long you have to either fix the problem or get out.
Okay, so it's like a warning shot.
Exactly.
Not the end of the line, but it's like, hey.
You're on notice.
Yeah, you better figure this out.
Right. And it's so important for tenants to realize that this isn't an immediate order to leave.
Oh, okay.
It just kicks off a process.
Got it.
There are specific steps you have to follow legally.
Okay, so you're saying there's still hope.
Absolutely. There's still hope.
At this point. Okay, well, let's talk about these different types of notices you mentioned.
Okay.
I know just from kind of skimming through all this stuff that we've got month-to-month tenancy termination, lease violations, and then, of course, non-payment of rent.
Right. You got it. And each of those situations calls for a different type of notice with a different timeline. So, for example, if a landlord wants to end a month-to-month agreement in California, they have to give you a written notice 30 days or 60 days.
Okay, so I saw that in these guides.
Right.
30 days if you've been there less than a year.
Exactly.
And 60 days if you've been there longer.
Exactly. And that's specific to California.
Right.
Other states have different rules.
Got it. So that's the standard month to month.
Yeah.
But when we talk about lease violations.
Yeah, things get a little trickier.
Right. So what happens there?
So if you violate a term of the lease, they can give you what's called a notice to comply or quit.
Okay, so that's like the official name.
That's the legal term.
Right.
And it'll spell out exactly what you did wrong.
Okay.
And it gives you a certain amount of time to fix it or leave.
Okay, so for instance, like if you had an unauthorized pet.
Right.
Or you caused some damage.
Exactly.
You get this notice. Yeah. And then you have a chance to fix it.
Right. And that's important because that gives you a chance to avoid eviction.
Okay, well, how long do you have to fix things?
Well, in California, it's usually just 3 days.
3 days?
3 days.
That's not a lot of time.
No, it's not.
To fix something?
Nope. And that kind of leads us to probably the most stressful notice, which is the notice to pay rent or quit.
Oh, yeah. The dreaded, the 3-day notice.
3-day notice. Yeah, that's the one that really puts the pressure on.
Absolutely. If you fall behind on rent, that's when they hit you with this notice.
Okay. And you have literally 3 days.
3 days to pay up or move out.
I'm sensing a theme here with these short timelines.
Yeah, it's definitely a sense of urgency. Right, and I can see why people freak out when they get these things.
Absolutely, but even with these tight deadlines, you still have rights.
Okay, good.
You still have options.
So you're saying don't panic.
Exactly, don't panic.
Okay, so we've got these different types of notices, we've got these timelines, but what happens next? Like, let's say I get a notice. What's the first thing I should do?
First thing, don't panic.
Okay, I'm sensing a theme.
It's important.
Right, don't panic.
Read that notice very carefully.
Okay.
Make sure you understand what it's saying.
Got it.
And then document everything.
Document everything. What do you mean by that?
Think of it like you're gathering evidence.
Oh, okay.
For a court case.
Okay.
You want a clear record of what's happening.
So make copies of the notice.
Absolutely.
Take pictures if there's damage.
Especially if it's something they're being blamed for.
Good.
And keep records of every interaction you have with the landlord.
So we're talking about texts, emails, voicemails, the whole 9 yards.
Everything, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so you're building like a timeline of what happened and when.
Right, because this could be super important if you have to challenge the eviction later on.
Okay, and how would that help?
Well, it could help you establish a pattern of behavior.
Okay.
Or prove that you've been responsive to their requests.
All right, so that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So we've got the types of notices, we've got the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
But what makes a notice valid in the first place?
Oh, that's a great question.
Like, are there certain things that have to be on there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In California, a notice has to meet specific legal requirements.
Okay, lay it on me. Okay. What are these requirements?
All right. Well, first off, it has to clearly state the reason why they're evicting you.
Okay.
It can't just be some vague thing like, you're being evicted.
Right.
It has to be specific.
Got it.
So if it's a lease violation, they have to spell out what you did.
Okay.
If it's about rent, they got to tell you exactly how much you owe.
So the landlord can't just be like, I don't like your face, get out.
No, it has to be a legitimate reason based on the lease or California law.
Okay, what else?
It has to include the correct notice, period.
Right. So like those 30 days, 60 days.
Exactly. And if they get that wrong, even by a day, that could invalidate the whole thing.
Wow. So like even a tiny technicality
could give you grounds to fight back.
That's interesting. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the landlord side of things.
Yeah.
But tenants have rights too.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting.
So we were just talking about tenants' rights.
Yes.
And how things get really interesting.
They do.
But what does that mean exactly?
Well, in California, tenants have a lot of rights.
Okay.
Especially during an eviction.
So what are we talking about here? Like what kind of rights?
Well, one of the most important ones is the right to a habitable dwelling.
Habitable meaning?
Meaning the landlord has to provide a place that meets basic health and safety standards.
So even if you're behind on rent,
right,
the landlord can't just ignore repairs.
Exactly. They can't just let the place fall apart.
So if they're trying to evict you for not paying,
right,
but the place is a mess because they've been neglecting it, that could actually be a defense.
That's right. It's a valid defense against the eviction.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So what kind of problems would we be talking about here?
Well, serious problems that affect your health and safety.
Okay.
So things like no running water.
Okay.
A broken heater in the winter.
Right.
A major pest infestation.
So we're not talking about like a leaky faucet.
No, we're talking about things that make the place basically unlivable.
Right.
And this is where that documentation comes in.
Oh, right. The pictures, the text.
Exactly, because you need proof
that
you've asked for repair.
And that they've ignored you.
Right. You need to be able to show that it's their fault.
That the place is unlivable.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the habitable dwelling thing. What other rights are we talking about?
Another big one is protection from retaliatory eviction.
Retaliatory eviction meaning?
Meaning the landlord can't evict you.
Okay.
For exercising your legal rights.
I feel like we touched on this a little bit earlier.
We did.
But can you give us some examples?
Sure. So let's say you report a health violation to the city.
Okay.
Or you request repairs that they've been ignoring.
Right.
And then they try to evict you.
That sounds retaliatory.
It could be.
So you're saying I can't get punished for like standing up for my rights?
Exactly. And it's not just about repairs.
Okay.
It also covers things like joining a tenants union.
Oh, wow.
Or complaining about unfair rental practices.
So tenants actually have a lot of power here?
They do.
It sounds like it's just a matter of knowing your rights.
And that's why it's so important to get legal advice early on.
So talk to a lawyer.
Yes, an experienced attorney can help you understand your options.
Okay. So we've talked about some of these tenants' rights. Now, what about defenses?
Defenses?
Yeah. Like you said, we can challenge an eviction.
Right.
But how? What are some of the legal defenses that tenants can use?
Well, there's several.
Okay.
And the best one to use will depend on the situation.
Okay, well, give us some examples.
Okay, well, one defense is that the eviction is retaliatory.
Right, so like we were just talking about.
Exactly. If you can prove they're just trying to punish you for standing up for your rights, then that could get the eviction dismissed.
Okay, so documentation is key here.
Absolutely.
I got to be able to show that connection.
Right, between your actions and their decision to evict you.
Okay, what else?
Another common defense is that the landlord didn't follow the proper procedures.
Right, all those technicalities.
Exactly, like the wording of the notice, the notice period, all those details.
Okay.
If they mess up even a little bit,
Yeah.
You might be able to challenge the eviction.
So it's not just about whether I did something wrong.
Right.
It's about whether they did everything right.
Exactly. They have to follow the law very carefully.
Okay, so we've got retaliatory eviction, procedural errors.
Yep.
What other defenses are out there?
Well, another one is that the landlord is discriminating against you.
Discrimination. How does that play into an eviction?
Well, landlords in California can't discriminate based on things like race, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, disability. So if they're trying to evict you because of one of those things, that could be grounds to stop the eviction.
So how do you prove that, though?
That's the tricky part.
Right.
You need evidence. Like discriminatory statements.
Okay.
Or a pattern of treating tenants differently based on those protected characteristics.
So it's not just a feeling, you have to be able to back it up.
Exactly, and that's another reason why it's so important to have a lawyer. They can help you gather that evidence.
So the more we talk about this, the more I realize how important it is to get legal help.
Absolutely. It can make a huge difference in the outcome.
So we've covered some of these defenses. Let's walk through the process a little bit. What happens after I get that notice? And I decide I want to fight back?
All right. So the first step is to file a response with the court.
A response meeting?
It's a formal document that outlines your defenses. And basically says why you think the eviction is unlawful.
So it's like saying, hold on, I'm not going down without a fight.
Exactly. It's your chance to tell your side of the story.
To the judge.
To the court.
So I filed this response. Then what?
Then usually there's a hearing.
So this is where it gets real.
Things get a bit more formal.
Right. So we're talking like a courtroom.
Yes, you'll be in front of a judge. Both sides can present their case.
This sounds kind of scary.
It can be.
Especially if you've never done it before.
Which is why it's so important to have an attorney.
Right. They can help you navigate this whole thing. So the tenant has a lawyer, the landlord probably has a lawyer, and they're both presenting their case to the judge.
Right.
What are some of the things that the judge would consider?
Well, they'll look at all the evidence. They'll listen to the arguments. And then they'll decide whether the eviction is valid.
So they can look at the lease agreement. Any communication between the landlord and the tenant.
Exactly.
The violations, the defenses, and whether the landlord followed all the rules.
All the procedures.
Right. So it's not just about whether I broke a rule or didn't pay rent.
Right.
It's about the whole context.
Exactly.
All right. So the hearing happens. The judge hears both sides. And then they make a decision.
Right.
What are the possible outcomes here?
Well, if the judge rules for the landlord, they'll issue an order of eviction.
Meaning you got to go.
Meaning you have to leave within a certain time frame.
And if the judge rules for the tenant,
then the eviction is dismissed.
And you get to stay?
And you get to stay.
So it's pretty black and white.
It can be. But there's also a third possibility.
What's that?
The judge might order a compromise.
A compromise?
Yeah, like a settlement between the landlord and the tenant.
So it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Right.
What would a compromise look like?
Well, it could involve things like the tenant agreeing to pay back rent. Maybe in installments. The landlord agreeing to make repairs. Or maybe they agree to modify the lease.
So there's room for negotiation.
Absolutely.
And again, this is where having a lawyer can be helpful.
They can help you negotiate a good deal.
So mediation sounds like a good option. But let's say it fails and we go to trial. What happens then?
Then it's like any other trial. Both sides present their case. They can bring evidence, call witnesses, make arguments.
I imagine this is pretty stressful for the tenant.
It can be. The stakes are high.
Your home is on the line. So the trial happens, and then who decides?
The judge.
And what are they looking at?
Same things we talked about before. The lease of communication, the violations, the defenses.
So again, it's not just about right or wrong.
Right.
It's about the law.
Exactly. And that's where a good attorney can make all the difference.
The whole process is complicated.
It is.
There are a lot of legal details.
There are.
And it seems like it's really important to have someone on your side.
Absolutely. Who knows what they're doing?
Well, this has been really helpful.
Good. I'm glad.
I feel like I'm starting to understand this a lot better.
That's the goal.
Is there anything else we should cover before we move on?
Well, there's one more thing I wanted to mention, and that's the resources that are available for both landlords and tenants.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, we've talked about legal aid organizations, but it's important to remember that there's a lot of help out there.
Right, because not everyone knows where to turn.
Exactly. So for tenants facing eviction, there are groups that offer free legal advice. They can help you understand your rights, and they might even be able to help you financially.
Oh, wow. And what about landlords?
There are resources for them, too, like landlord associations and legal resources.
So where can people find this stuff?
Well, a good place to start is online.
Okay.
Just search for tenant rights organizations or landlord associations.
In California.
Right, and you'll find a ton of information.
Okay, what about offline?
You can check community centers, libraries, even courthouses.
All right, so it's good to know that there's help out there.
It is.
For everyone involved.
Exactly.
Well, this has been really enlightening.
Good.
I feel much more informed about eviction notices.
That's great to hear.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
We've learned so much about the different types of notices, the timelines, the documentation, the defenses.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
And we've talked about how important it is to get legal help.
Absolutely, knowledge is power.
So, true. Well said. So, I think we've accomplished our mission here.
I think so, too.
Of demystifying evictions in California.
I agree.
But before we wrap up,
I
have one final thought-provoking question.
Okay, listening.
What steps can you take right now to be prepared?
Oh, that's a good one.
In case you ever get an eviction notice.
Yeah.
Whether you're a landlord or a tenant.
That's important.
Because the more prepared you are, the better equipped you'll be.
Exactly.
To handle this whole process.
Being proactive can make a big difference.
This has been another great deep dive.
It has been.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you next time. So we've talked about notices and rights and defenses and the whole court process.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is, but I'm thinking there must be some common mistakes that people make.
Oh, yeah.
When they're facing eviction.
Absolutely, especially tenants.
Really?
Oh, yeah, they often make mistakes out of fear.
Okay.
Or just not really understanding the situation.
So what are some of these mistakes? What should people watch out for?
Well, one of the biggest ones is ignoring the notice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some people think if they just pretend it didn't happen, it'll go away.
Like just bury your head in the sand.
Exactly, but that never works.
Especially not with legal stuff.
Right. Ignoring the notice only makes things worse.
Okay, so that's a big no-no.
Big no-no.
Don't ignore the notice.
What else? Well, another common mistake is not responding to the notice properly.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about filing a formal response with the court?
Yeah, outlining your defenses.
Right. Well, some tenants, they just try to call the landlord or send a text.
Yeah.
But that's not enough.
It has to be official.
It has to be a formal written document filed with the court by the deadline.
So again, this is where a lawyer can be really helpful.
Absolutely. They can make sure everything is done right.
All right. What other pitfalls are out there?
Let's see. Another one is failing to gather evidence.
Right. Yeah. Document everything.
Exactly. But some people don't think about this until it's too late.
Oh, so they don't have pictures of the damage.
Right. Or they deleted those important texts.
So it's like, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen.
Pretty much without evidence, it's hard to prove your case.
Okay, so document everything. Got it? Any other common mistakes?
Yeah. One more I see a lot.
Okay.
Is tenants trying to represent themselves in court?
Oh, without a lawyer?
Yeah.
I can see how that could go badly.
It often does. Eviction law is complicated, and the court process is intimidating. Without a lawyer, you might not understand the procedures.
Okay.
You might miss deadlines. You might not present your case effectively.
So even though it seems like you're saving money, it might actually cost you more in the long run.
Exactly. And remember, there are legal aid organizations out there that offer free or low-cost help.
So no one should have to go through this alone.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about tenant mistakes. What about landlords? Do they make mistakes too?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Really?
And sometimes those mistakes can actually help the tenant.
How so?
Well, one common mistake is not following the proper procedures.
Oh, right. Those technicalities.
Exactly, like serving the notice incorrectly.
Okay.
Or not including all the required information.
Yeah.
If they mess up, the court might dismiss the case.
So even if the landlord is right about why they want to evict, they still have to follow the rules.
Absolutely. They have to dot their I's and cross their T's.
Okay, what else?
Another mistake is not keeping good records.
Okay.
So things like lease agreements, rent receipts, any communication with the tenant.
So it's not just tenants who need to document everything.
Nope, landlords too.
Yeah.
If they can't prove their claims, they might lose the case.
Okay, so be organized, keep good records.
Exactly.
Any other landlord mistakes we should mention?
Yeah, one more.
Okay.
And that's self-help evictions.
Self-help meaning?
Meaning they try to evict the tenant on their own.
Oh, without going to court.
Exactly.
So like changing the locks, shutting off the utilities, throwing their stuff out.
That's all illegal in California.
Wow. So landlords can't take the law into their own hands?
Nope. They have to go through the court process.
Okay, so no DIY evictions?
Right.
This is a lot of information.
It is.
But what are the main takeaways here?
Well, the most important thing is to know your rights.
Okay.
Whether you're a landlord or a tenant.
Right.
The eviction process is complicated.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand how it works.
And to get legal help?
Absolutely. An attorney can make all the difference.
This deep dive has been really helpful.
I'm glad.
It's so important to have this knowledge.
Knowledge is power.
And for anyone looking for more information about tenant rights,
yes,
I highly recommend checking out the Martinez Law Center.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
Their website is martinezlawcenter.com. They specialize in representing tenants in eviction cases.
And they serve Orange County, Riverside, San Diego, and Los Angeles.
Well, I think we've covered pretty much everything here.
I think so, too.
We've gone from feeling totally lost to feeling empowered.
That's what we like to hear.
It's been great talking to you.
Likewise.
This has been another insightful deep dive.
It has been.
Thank you for joining us. And remember, if you're ever facing an eviction, don't hesitate to seek legal help.
Absolutely.
Your home might depend on it.
Call now 714-442-9741. Thank you.